Hi, guys, and welcome to Pesmo. We're slowly launching a new web series called HR Post. My name's Rebecca. I'm the co founder and CEO of Pesmo. Pesmo works to resolve all of your hire to retire needs, and we're super excited for anyone who wants to take a demo with us. And today, I have an amazing person within the HR tech space. Her name is Lyndsey, and Lyndsey will give an introduction of herself.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lyndsey. I'm the manager of talent for Headspace. I've been in the tech recruiting field for about 12 years now, and I'm excited to be here.
So, Lyndsey and I will be talking about what it takes to build a high performing engineering team. And both of us have worked in California over like the last 12 years. And since Lyndsey has been working in highly technical roles, she has been learning like all the amazing sort of kinks that sort of like kind of like supercharge a company. And so what I'm really interested in learning, and if anyone wants to drop any Q&A, please feel free. We have our team actively looking out for questions. What I'm generally really interested in learning about is more of like the changes that Lyndsey has seen between pre-COVID and post-COVID. So, Lyndsey, if you want to just talk first about like, what does it mean to build a high performance engineering team?
Yep. So, kind of starting at the beginning, I think having a good understanding of just the values that you might have within your engineering org is a good place to start. That will really set the foundation of like what is most important to your team and then what you want to find out there in the market when you start talking to candidates and growing that team. And being able to speak to those to candidates is also going to be really important because they similarly also want to know what values they're going to gain from the organization. And it just allows you to kind of set yourself apart a little bit more, right? Like it's really easy to say, oh, these are company values and these are so important to us. But when you're able to say, yeah, but these are actually our engineering specific values, and this is why these ones are actually important to our specific team, then that candidate is able to get just like a better picture of what it's like to work there. So I'd say that's like generally a good starting point. And yeah, just making sure that your values are kind of weaved through every step of the process, right? Like we're not just talking about it in the first step, but really like the engineers on the actual team see them, believe them, and are able to speak to them in the interview as well, kind of provide examples of those values and how they show up in the workplace. I think that's like a good starting point generally.
Okay. So a lot of founders reach out to me a lot in terms of like, how do we actually hire for our engineers, right? Like because it is very hard to find amazing, I mean, the talent is out there in
Yeah.
terms of companies getting better at finding them and onboarding them better and sort of building like better retention strategies that's a different story. So I guess I just wanted to kind of get a sense of like what does your hiring process look like and what would you tell like HR managers or anyone who is building a high performing technical team?
Yep. Well, obviously, kind of starts with a job description in many ways. More so like making sure that it's like super inclusive, right? Like I think one, nobody really likes writing job descriptions, but if you take the time to really be thoughtful around it, put different indicators in there that get the candidates excited about not only the work but the team, the company. That's just a great tool that you can utilize across many different avenues when you're going out and searching for talent, whether it's posting it to LinkedIn, sharing it with somebody in your network directly. Just start with a really solid JD. You want to avoid words like rock star and can wear many hats. Like just really focus more on the work, the impact that they'll make by that work, and start there. And then, yes, like another thing, obviously there's all these great online tools, LinkedIn, job boards, meetup.com. But if I were honestly starting a team from scratch, like I would probably start by going in person to like different tech meetups. That's actually how I met Becky. So getting those in-person connections will just allow you to maybe not only meet one person, but maybe multiple people. And people know people. So that's another reason why kind of getting out there in those spaces allows you to make more connections. And it's a lot better in person than kind of behind the computer screen, which we're kind of used to. Of course, you can send out like LinkedIn messages, kind of spread the word about your openings. Maybe it's a LinkedIn post. But I personally prefer all the in-person connections I can get.
Mm.
But those are
In,
just some of the ways.
in your experience, do you feel that many of the technical candidates that you interviewed, do you feel like they read the JD
Yeah,
from your experience? Okay, great.
yeah. A lot of the times candidates will come to me and say, "Oh, I read your job description and like it truly aligned with like my goals." And to
Mm,
me, that's like exactly what I want to be hearing, right? Like that shows to me that one, they took the time to read it, and two,
right.
they can see themselves working here. And I think that's what you essentially want to convey with a job description is like making them get a sense of what it would like be like to work there.
Mm. Um, Before we started this stream, we actually talked a bit about DI, what was it?
B.
DEIB.
Yeah.
If you could talk about the B part, 'cause that's something new to me and I found it really interesting. I would love to share it with this group.
Yeah. So as you all might be aware, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And yes, here at Headspace, we added the B because belonging is also a huge part of that, right? It's not just about hiring diverse talent. It's not just about making them feel included, but also making them feel like they belong in that organization and that they can really have an impact there. You know, you have to make an environment that people want to stay in and feel
Mhm.
empowered by. And so that B is very important to the overall like DEI strategy.
Mm. So, most often, maybe the employer has a great idea of what that B could look like, but what do you recommend for a candidate to really understand what that B is for that company? Like you mentioned tech meetups as one of them.
Yeah, I mean, internally for the B, I think you have to be engaged, right? You can't just not show up to like the different events that are going on that the company might be throwing. Like, for instance, we're hosting like weekly events, different programming that they can be a part of where they get to learn about, a new topic, meet with other coworkers maybe they don't normally get to meet with on the day to day. If you're not engaged, then you won't feel that sense of a belonging. And so that's, it's kind of a two-way street, if you will,
Yeah,
to like making sure that you are staying engaged in that environment.
yeah.
Also, just, yeah, kind of having buddies maybe outside of your direct team so that way you feel connected in other ways to the organization. I definitely know I feel that way when I have friendships with like my hiring managers or product leaders, because then it kind of takes some of the stress away from the day-to-day job because I know like,
Mm,
okay, well, that person's in my corner, that person has my back. We have a really good relationship, and so that kind of just gives me a sense of ease and calm as I go into like maybe some more of those like more stressful meetings or meetings that I might
yeah.
be like, oh, I don't know how this is gonna go.
Mm.
So yeah.
I will say, like, the B part, especially as a Latina in tech, is probably one of the most important factors that can sort of like make or break a place for a candidate in the sense that it's so different reading someone's LinkedIn profile or reading them on a website versus like meeting them in person. Like, I guess
Yes.
like what 70% of communication is body language, and just like for example, we met at an event and we automatically clicked, like
Yeah.
that doesn't always happen. And you do I do think like companies do start to form like a very particular form of culture, and they start hiring for people who actually have that sort of culture. I don't know what you've seen over time.
Yeah. The candidates that just like show that drive and excitement for the work that you're doing do tend to like sometimes do better in the interview process. Not all the time, but they're just when they have that hunger and that drive, it just really shines through. And sometimes to your point, you can really only get a gauge of that when you're talking to somebody.
Yeah.
I feel the same way when I'm looking at resumes all day. It's like, this is great, but I know I'm truly not going to know who this person is until I get on the phone
Yeah.
with them. And really peel back the layers of like what makes them tick, what gets them excited. And a lot of the times resumes don't do that. So
Hmm.
you have to kind of go in further.
So, two things on technical hiring. Uh, how do you know which person to actually call on a resume? Because technical hires tend to be more introverted versus
Mhm.
like, I don't know, extroverted. So I guess like, how do you know when is the right time to call someone on a resume?
Yeah, that's a good call out. Couple different factors. So obviously, do they have the right experience that we're looking for based on the JD, like the right technologies, the
Mhm.
right, if we're looking for subscription-based experience, like do they have that relevant experience on their resume? And then just like other little indicators that showcase to me that like, hey, maybe this person is special, right? Like maybe they won a recent award for engineering at their last company that like I want to learn more about, or
Mhm.
maybe they were part of a hackathon and they like created this really cool project that's on their resume that I want to learn more about.
Mhm.
Kind of like little things like that that show me who they are a little bit outside of the day-to-day job.
Right.
I always tell candidates as well, I highly recommend adding like a kind of like a personal hobbies or some type of like section on your resume that does showcase a little bit what you like to do outside of work, because then it just makes you slightly more memorable. It kind of puts somewhat of a face to the name in many ways.
Mhm.
And those are probably like some things that I look out for. But yeah, it really just depends.
Mhm. And my second question was more like, I've been talking to a lot of like recruiting agencies and what it takes to like find the right candidate is has been since technical hires are more introverted, they may not perform as a extroverted, usually HR is extroverted, so they may not perform the way an extroverted person might expect so
Yeah.
someone to perform. So how do you sort of measure that over time? Like maybe someone like completely bombs an actual interview, but
Mhm.
from a technical point of view, they're an amazing addition to the team.
I really like that you brought this up because I feel like it's very like on spot for what's happening right now in the market. I think
Mm,
historically we've always kind of had the same interview track, right? Like you have to do a bunch of different technical screens before you ultimately get the job. Maybe you meet with product, maybe you meet with the hiring manager, and then that's pretty much the process. And post COVID, post just like the world going crazy, like us as a company, we realized like, hey, maybe we can't just have one interview track. Like one interview track does not suit every person. And so we have had to start looking at other alternatives, whether it's, hey, maybe giving that candidate like a take home assessment. So that way they're
mhm,
by themselves. To your point, they're able to just kind of focus on the work, not be on a screen. Another option that we're playing around with is like, hey, what if we did the technical interviews live, but we took away the camera view, right? So that way you feel
mhm.
like a little bit less on the spot and that like somebody's staring at you while you're working through the technical problem. Or like giving more time to a candidate so that way they feel like less time pressure constraints when they're going through the technical exercise.
So it
So
feels more like being in the office, right? Because
exactly. Or yeah, and that's another one that we've also tried is like, hey, how about you actually come to our office and do the interview so that way you just
mm,
feel like you're in the space and that you're supported and the recruiter will be there to help out and assist you. So those are just some of the ways, but like this type of work really interests me because I feel like it is the future of recruiting in many ways, of like being able to establish many different maybe not many, but a few different interview tracks. And then to your earlier point, how do you make sure that the assessment is somewhat the same across those different tracks? So that way you're not biasing tracks, if that makes
mm,
sense.
yeah.
So yeah.
So you mean basically allowing the candidate, like, do you want a virtual interview? Do you want
Mhm.
a on-site interview? Do you want like a take-home interview? And sort of like building frameworks to sort of remove the bias as much as possible is what I'm getting.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I totally get it. Like interview anxiety is completely real. And I also encourage candidates to talk about it too, because I feel like maybe a couple years ago it was like a little taboo to bring up something like that. And now I'm seeing more and more candidates kind of be open about it. And I'm like, thank
Mhm.
you for bringing this up because now I can actually show up and support you as your recruiter. Whereas before, if I didn't know, I'm not truly being able to set you up for success.
Mhm. Mhm. Since we're talking about testing so much, I want to bring up our next favorite topic, which is AI in the realm of like building teams and hiring and sort of battling against cheating. How do you sort of like what has been changing for you with the advent of AI, and how have you been managing against that?
Yeah. So, I mean, AI is the future of recruiting in many ways. So like as a recruiter, I am trying to lean into some of the new AI tools, especially like when it comes to like sourcing and finding top talent and like just making sure that our pipelines are really robust. The other side of that is that yes, we're just now starting to see like more and more candidates utilize like ChatGPT during their interviews, which is kind of crazy. But you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to keep happening, so it's good that we're talking about it. And in regards to that, I think one, we need to start as like a recruiting team, start communicating to candidates like, hey, you
Yeah.
probably shouldn't use chat gpt during your interviews. You know, it's not really setting yourself up for success or the company up for success, because you know within 1 to 2 weeks we'll realize that maybe it's not the right fit technically. And it just, you know, it's a waste of everyone's time, honestly, like the interviewer's time, of the candidate's time. um, and maybe that just means that you need a little bit more prep time before the interview, which I think is something that, you know, you should definitely ask for. I know as a recruiter, sometimes I'm like, hey, can you interview tomorrow? And some
Mm-hmm.
candidates are like, oh, I can, but that's going to be a little tricky for me. I'm not going to have enough prep time. So, you know, just making sure that you feel really set up for success before going into that interview. Um, and yeah, I don't know, like in time, maybe there'll be a world where like you'll be able to tell more clearly if somebody is using one of these
Mm.
AI tools.
Yeah. I will say from our experience, like if something, if an answer has been generated on ChatGPT, you can use tools to also see if that answer was generated on ChatGPT. So there is a way to sort of have a plagiarism check, right?
Yeah.
So, and what I just hope people take away from this is that recruiters, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Lyndsey, care more about the attempt to problem solve and to push through a problem than getting the answer 100%
Correct.
correct. Yeah.
Definitely. I tell candidates that every time I'm prepping them for an interview, hey, it's not about getting the question perfectly right. It's more how you communicate and collaborate through the problem. And that I
Hmm.
think helps eliminate some of that interview anxiety a little bit, because I'm like, listen, we're not looking for perfection here. Or like one of our on-site interviews, we have them like build an app. I'm like, we're not looking for a fully working app. We're just looking to
Yeah.
see how far you can get through it.
Hmm.
And it's supposed to be fun, right? Like this is the type of work that they would be doing in the role. So that's the other thing too. It's like, well, if you don't feel highly comfortable doing that type of work on the spot in the interview, like that's very similar to what it's going to be like in the position. So just getting a sense of like, okay, is this actually the type of work I want to be doing? Or yeah.
Hmm. I think you also called it like bringing your most authentic self, because I think what candidates often forget is it's not just an employer looking to hire you. It's also about you making the best decision for yourself.
Yeah.
Employers actually, and maybe I may not speak for all employers out there, but employers actually want to focus a lot on retention. So if there is a mismatch, employers would want to know earlier versus later, because there is time spent on both sides, one side on training, and then the employee side of like learning the tech stack, learning everyone's team, the names on everyone on the team. So it's better to sort of bring your authentic self from the very beginning. And what do you do in order to sort of like enable that?
Like me personally, or just in general with like new people coming in the door and like new
Yes.
hires?
Yes.
Yeah. So one, when I'm talking to candidates, I let them know like, hey, these are all the different like URG groups that we have internally. These are all the different
What's a URG?
uh, like um, like or sorry, ERG,
ERG. Okay.
employee resource group. So yeah, we have like different groups within the company, and they like host different events each week or different gatherings where people can come in and talk about different topics that might be impacting that ERG. And it creates like these little kind of like communities within the company that people can be a part of,
Mm-hmm.
depending on like what they identify of or what groups. So like for instance, there's like a women group. So that's like a really great one that's constantly like having just like
Mm-hmm.
chats go off in Slack in terms of like, hey, I experienced this, or I'm going through this. And once again, creates those safe spaces. Because yeah,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're joining a new company, you feel like you're just being dropped into like a large like pond. And so how do you find those like little cohorts of people that you can like build those even deeper connections with? So I
Mhm.
give them a sense of that, even before they join, but then also after they join. We also do a thing at Headspace called like the buddy program. So that way they have somebody kind of within those
Yeah.
first couple of weeks to like set them up for success and be there for questions. And then kind of back to my earlier point, it does require a lot on yourself to like be engaged and show up to those different events to meet people. Because if you're not doing that, then you won't be engaged and then you probably won't
Right.
feel that sense of belonging. So those are definitely some of the pieces of it as well. And just finding your why, like why do you show up for work every day? Like what does get you excited to come to the office or log on to the computer every day?
Mm.
So that way, if you ever feel moments of like, oh, I don't know if I feel like I'm integrated or don't feel like I'm like a part of this team, you have other anchors that are like bringing you back to, okay, but what's the bigger picture here?
Right. Right. And so shifting things a bit from like acquiring talent, bringing people to a company. What about the retention side? Like, how do you think of things when it comes to compensation, benefits, performance, progression tracks? Like, how does all of that work together for you?
Yeah, it's a whole, to your point, like packaged together, right? Like you can't have one without the other. They're all kind of dependent on each other, and so I think it's really important that companies like hear directly from the employees what they want, whether that's sending out a survey around like the benefits and the offerings that the company might have, whether it's hosting like little like roadshow roundtable meetings where you get to like talk this out with the different employees, because
Mm.
then you're able to really tailor it based off what employees are saying. And like the employees at my company might say something completely different than a different company. So just really getting a sense of like, okay, what is most important to people, and then having it all kind of baked in together into the what we call like full compensation package. And to your point, not just like numbers, but yeah, benefits, growth, learning opportunities. Um, those are all very important.
Another crazy thing I've been seeing in the space has been that, because of DEI, because we're trying to have more diverse group of people within a company, the same sort of like benefits packages don't really provide the same value across
Mhm.
like different cohorts. So some companies are sort of breaking these sort of packages down and trying to figure out, what's the best for each side. For example, maybe for people in their 20s, it's more of like more things on like the progression side, like how can we
Mhm.
fast track you into figuring out what you want to do with your career, where you want to grow. So maybe it's a lot of like certification sort of processes. And then for those in their 30s, maybe it's more of like fertility or like, I guess, maternity sort of programs. And like for those around their 40s, it's more of just like helping parents sort of pay, help, provide loans for like schools or,
Mhm.
once kids start going to school. So I found like this, it's not just one thing anymore, but it's also like tailoring your package based on like the different cohorts within your company.
Yep. And another thing on that is a lot of the times companies will change benefits and employees will like freak out.
Yeah.
What's happening? Feel
Different doctor, different
yeah, like
healthcare system.
I,
Yeah.
it's like which is all very true, right? But also it's good that companies are like re-looking at benefits every so often, because to your point, like they do change, and depending on what your employees are saying in that moment in time could be very different. I mean, think about it when the pandemic hit, right? Like the benefits, that all of that changed, right? In
Yeah.
terms of like what was most important to people. And so it is good when companies take the time to like reevaluate, instill new ones. I know it's like hard at first because there are lots of changes, but at least they are being thoughtful around what is most important to people. So
Mm. And earlier before this stream started, we were talking about sort of pre-COVID trends and then post-COVID trends of how the future of work is changing. How before
yeah.
your net your net of like recruiting was just cast around the metropolitan LA area, but now it has changed to all over the United States. Would you like to share a bit more of your experience with that and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, when I can only hire in LA, I'm looking at companies like Snapchat and Tinder and all these like
Hmm.
bigger powerhouse tech companies, which are great, and like the talent there is great. But when you start hiring all that same type of talent, it starts to just get a little homogenous. And so by being able to hire across the US, now we're able to tap in to new companies that like I haven't even heard of before, or finding talent that is coming from a different background that maybe we don't have on our team. And so
Hmm.
it is opening up the door a lot in terms of what we're able to tap into, and just creating more opportunities to create, yeah, a diverse population of employees. Um, and it's
So how do you,
interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead and finish your thought.
No, and it's just interesting hearing that more and more companies are starting to go back into like office or hybrid environments, because I feel like, well, yes, like we all kind of want some of that in-person camaraderie back. It will also limit the talent pool that you're able to tap into.
Mm.
And so I feel like what I've heard from candidates post COVID is that they really enjoy the flexibility of like, hey, I want to live here 1 year and then maybe move somewhere and live somewhere else for a year. And I
Right.
can't necessarily do that if my company is requiring me to come into the office. And so it's interesting hearing more and more companies going back.
So
Now
do
that
you think the trend is going more like hybrid or more like work from home from what you're experiencing?
it's hybrid, but when you're requiring somebody to go into the office 3 days a week, like that's kind of pigeonholing them into being close to that office, right? Like even in LA, if I lived like all the way in the valley and my office was in Santa Monica, like that drive 3 days a week would be a lot, right? And so, yeah, just I think making it more flexible will, in the long term, allow you
Mhm.
to tap into even better talent.
So we'll be wrapping up a bit, but before that, I want to ask one question I'm very curious about. How do you actually cast a wider net? For example, in LA, you said, okay, you guys mostly look for more powered tech houses like Snapchat because you know the space in LA. But when you have to hire all over the US, like maybe Detroit or Denver or like Orlando, I mean, like the resumes, the experiences start to look a bit differently. So how do you cast a wider net and how do you sort of like orient yourself within that?
Yeah, we have a great tool through LinkedIn called LinkedIn Insights,
Mm.
which does allow you to see, okay, what are the top companies in North Carolina, or what are the top companies in Virginia, right? And so getting more familiarity of, to your point, places that I might not be as familiar with. And then seeing, okay, well, what types of engineers do these companies hire at those companies? And then you're able to say, okay, well, if they're hiring tons of data engineers and I need a data engineer, like maybe that's a good place to start.
Mm.
Um, or yes, like having different LinkedIn posts calling out that like, hey, these opportunities are remote. So that way people can share them to maybe people in those locations that could be, a little bit harder to find. And yeah, I have like a variety of like tools in my toolkit that I'm able to like tap into that show me, okay, how many like engineers are in this location versus that
Mhm.
location, and that type of thing. And I also get super excited when I find like an engineer in a state that I've like never hired in before, and they're like very strong. I'm like, wow,
Mm.
like so cool that we're able to tap into this because previously we wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah, amazing. I will definitely be asking for the that list of tools. I'm always curious figuring out how to cast a wider net.
Yes.
So to wrap up, Lindsay, any final thoughts on what you think the audience should take away with building a high performing engineering team, or maybe on the future of work?
Yeah. One other thing that I think is a helpful tidbit is, if your interview team is able to just be genuine and authentic during the interview process, that'll go a long way as you're interviewing candidates, because candidates want to work with people that they enjoy working with and get a good like energy and vibe. And if you're able to really showcase that during the process, it'll just help you so much more with locking in that talent. Some interviews can be very like rigorous or uptight, or you just won't feel like that sense of, oh, like I'm super excited to work there. Like I've definitely walked out of
Right.
interviews and be like, I don't want to work there, right? And so the more that you're able to just showcase who you are as a person, how you're able to show up authentically in your own workspace, and how that new hire can potentially do the same, I think will speak volumes to, yeah, just attracting that top talent and hopefully closing it.
Absolutely. So, Lyndsey, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for helping us understand what the current HR pulse is in the world. And again, if you ever want to come back, we'd be so happy to have you. Thanks,
Yes,
Lyndsey.
definitely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.